Lacan first presented his theory of the mirror stage in 1936 and later published a complete version of this essay in 1949. It is one of the most famous texts in modern psychoanalysis. The essay explains how human beings develop a sense of identity. Lacan explores how an infant forms the I, which we commonly call the ego. The ego is not something we are born with, it is also not a natural result of biological growth. Instead, the ego is born through an encounter with an external image. This encounter happens in a state of illusion and misrecognition. The self we think we know is actually built on a false foundation. Lacan begins his essay by comparing human infants with animals. He looks at how a human child and a young chimpanzee behave in front of a mirror. At the age of 6 months, a chimpanzee actually has better instrumental intelligence than a human baby. The chimpanzee can understand things and solve simple physical problems faster than the baby. However, when both are placed in front of a mirror, they act very differently. The chimpanzee may look at its reflection for a short time. It might try to touch the mirror or look behind it. Once the chimpanzee realizes that the reflection is just a useless image, it loses all interest. The animal understands that the image has no real physical reality, so it ignores it. The human infant acts in the exact opposite way. Between the ages of 6 and 18 months, the human baby becomes fascinated by its reflection. The baby does not walk or stand firmly yet. It is usually held up by an adult or a mechanical walker. But when the baby sees its image, it experiences a rush of intense joy. Lacan calls this feeling jubilant activity. The child tilts forward to look closely at the glass. The child plays with the mirror. It observes how its own physical movements match the movements of the reflected image. The baby fixes this visual image deeply in its mind. This moment is a turning point in human development. To explain why this happens, Lacan looks at human biology. Human beings are unique because they are born prematurely. When a baby is born, its nervous system is not fully developed. This is an anatomical fact. The baby cannot coordinate its muscles well. It cannot walk, feed itself, or control its body perfectly. Because of this lack of development, the infant experiences its own body as broken and scattered. Psychoanalysis calls this the experience of the fragmented body. The infant feels like its limbs, head, and torso are separate pieces. It feels weak, helpless, and completely uncoordinated. This creates a state of internal anxiety and discord within the child. The mirror changes everything for the infant. When the baby looks into the mirror, it sees a complete body. This visual form is called a gestalt. The gestalt is a unified total shape. For the first time, the child sees its body as a single organized whole. The image shows a boundary and a clear stature. It makes the child look powerful, stable, and complete. This external image stands in a sharp contrast to the child's actual internal feelings. On the inside, the child feels weak and broken. On the outside, the mirror shows a perfect picture of health and control. The child identifies with its reflection. Lacan states that this act is a true identification. It is a psychological transformation. The child assumes the image as its own self. Lacan calls this reflected image the ideal I. It is the original root of the human ego. The child loves this ideal image because it promises a future of physical mastery and total control. It gives the child a sense of mental permanence that it does not actually possess in reality. This process sounds positive, but Lacan warns that it contains a major trap. The mirror stage is built entirely on a lie. It is based on what Lacan calls me-cognizance, which means misrecognition. The child says that image is me, but in reality, the image is not the child. The image is just a flat reflection on a wall. It is outside of the child. It is a reversed and frozen picture. Therefore, the human ego is born in a place outside of the self. The child finds its identity by looking at an external object. This creates a permanent state of alienation. The human subject can only know itself through the mediation of another person or object. The self is forever split. There is a deep gap between the true fragmented inner experience and the false unified external ego. The ego is a fictional construct that masks our real weakness. We build our entire sense of self on something that is not truly us. Lacan describes the mirror stage as a fast paced psychological drama. This drama moves from insufficiency to anticipation. Insufficiency is a starting point, it is a painful feeling of being an uncoordinated baby. Anticipation is the next step. The child looks ahead into the future. It sees the unified image and anticipates the day it will be strong and complete. This movement projects the human being into history and fantasy. Because the ego is an imagined ideal, the human subject spends its entire life trying to catch up to this ideal. People create fantasies of total power, perfection, and absolute security. These fantasies come directly from the mirror stage. They are attempts to protect the fragile ego from falling back into the feeling of a broken body. We spend our lives chasing a picture of ourselves that never really existed. The mirror stage does not just shape the individual mind, it also shapes all human social relations. Because the ego is found in an external image, the child connects identity with the other person becomes a mirror. This creates a complicated relationship of love and hatred. On one hand, the child needs the other person to confirm its identity. The gaze of the mother or caregiver acts as a validating mirror. The child looks at the adult to confirm that the image is good and real. On the other hand, this setup creates intense jealousy and rivalry. The child sees the other person as an ideal competitor. The other person seems to possess the perfect unity that the child desperately wants. Therefore, human aggressiveness is rooted in this primary psychic structure. We see the other as a threat to our own ego consistency. Social life becomes a constant struggle between identifying with others and fighting against them. Our relationships are always colored by this original competition for a perfect image. Lacan uses this theory to critique other schools of psychology. During his time, a movement called ego psychology was very popular. Ego psychologists believed that ego was a healthy, rational center of the mind. They believed that therapy should strengthen the patient's ego to help them adapt to society. Lacan strongly rejects this approach. Strengthening the ego means strengthening an illusion. The ego is not a rational master. It is a defensive wall made of misrecognitions. It is a mechanism designed to hide the truth of our fragmented nature and unconscious desires. True psychoanalysis should not strengthen this false wall. It should help the patient see through the illusions of the ego. It should expose the alienated structure of our identity. Therapy should not make people more normal. It should make them more honest about their inner divisions. The mirror stage shows that human identity is built on a visual mirage. The mirror stage is not just a brief phase that happens to a baby and then vanishes. It is a permanent structural framework that shapes human life forever. It marks our entry into what Lacan calls the imaginary order, the realm of images, surfaces, and egos. Throughout our lives, we continue to seek ourselves in external mirrors. We look for ourselves in social status, consumer goods, media images, and the opinions of other people. We are always trying to confirm that the image we see is real. By revealing the alienating origin of the I, Lacan changed how we understand human consciousness. He showed that the self is not a fixed, stable thing. It is a story we tell ourselves based on a reflection we saw in a mirror long ago. true mental health begins when we accept this fundamental illusion.